Hi, everybody. We would like you to welcome you to the remote notary session this afternoon. We're glad you could be here. Our instructor today is Adelaide McNamara. And I'd like to just say a little bit about her and introduce her and then welcome her here. She is a special assistant to the Lieutenant Governor working as the Notary Public Administrator and the specialist in annexations, incorporations, and entity registration. She graduated in 2019 from George Washington University with a double major in political science and economics. Prior to working for the Lieutenant Governor, she interned for Congressman Stewart of Utah in the Bipartisan Policy Center. Thank you and welcome, Maddie. I'll turn the time over to you.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thanks for having me today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. So I am going to go over just notaries and kind of introduce the remote notary aspect that we launched in November of 2019. We are obviously not expecting it to be as necessary as it has been this year. So we've been making things up a little as we go because we didn't expect as much stress on this, but in current climate it has become very necessary. So this is a little overview. We're going to go over the notary application process because there's been some changes this year to it. Then get into remote notary, how the vendors are approved, the application process and approval process, the new background check requirement, the difference between remote and electronic notarizations, printing and recording documents, and then briefly touch on entity registration. So can you, here, maybe I'll do that. There we go. Okay, so here is the notary application process. Step one is the same. You log on and create your account. I am just going to exit out of this so I can show this way. So to create your account, you'll be on notary.utah.gov. You'll log in and the first thing that you'll see is this. This is a pre-existing account, so it's a renewal. It's got all of my information and it will auto load onto this page. You'll put in your addresses. One really key thing is to make sure that your addresses, physical and business, are different. It's required in Utah code to make them different. Keep going, answer all the questions, continue, and you'll take the test. The test has remained the same. The only thing that's different in the application process is how we're receiving documents now. We recently launched a portal where you can upload your documents. So once you submit your test and pay your fee, you'll be taken to this page. You can scan in and upload your notarial bond and oath of office now, which is different because previously we've received them via mail. So this reduces the time. It'll have all your information, and this is where you'll submit the background check. Besides that, that's the only real difference in the application process. So we just wanted to briefly touch on that. And we'll talk about the background check requirement a bit later. Once your commission is approved, we'll email it to you as we have in the past, and you can take it notarized and get it to a stamp company. All right, now getting into remote notarization. Remote notarization allows you to not be in the physical presence of the individual, which is kind of crucial right now. In order to do this, we didn't want to just allow people to use Zoom and Skype because there's really no accountability when you're just using those platforms. There's no real identification process. Anyone could be on the other end, and it allows for a bit more fraud to be present if people would like to. So we had the idea of approved remote notary vendors, which are solution platforms that apply through the state to, they apply through the state in order to have Utah notaries be able to use their platforms to be used for remote notarization. So the approved vendors submit their application. They sign an oath that they'll follow all the requirements laid out in code. However, we have had some situations recently where we have found vendors not being required. So in Utah County, we received a remote notarization that didn't have the commission number, expiration date, or seal. If there is ever anything about that, please contact our office with questions if something's been remotely notarized or electronically notarized. If it doesn't appear to follow Utah code, we can look into it, reach out to the vendors, and make sure that everything is in compliance to make everyone else's job easier. I will also send out these slides because I've put a lot of links in here. So just on this page, I have the link to the administrative rules for remote notarization. If anyone's interested to look over those. And I also have a demo on how a remote notarization takes place. It's really long, so I was going to play it, but it's about 40 minutes, which is basically the entirety of this. So if you are interested in watching that, it's Doc Verify, which has been one of our most popular approved remote notary vendors. And they are more universal. Some remote notary vendors specifically are designed for like the housing industry, for ESCO agents and signing agents for closings. But Doc Verify is a more universal one that allows for independent notaries to use their platform to conduct notarization. So if you want to watch that, I will send this out later. All right, so how to become a remote notary. Number one, you have to contract or be hired by the vendor before you can begin the process. We want them to train you. We don't know how their solutions work. We put it on the vendors to make sure that they're conducting it properly. So once you're hired by the vendor, you'll be given an application to become a remote notary to submit to the state. Along with your $5,000 bond you've already taken out to apply to be a notary, you have to take out $10,000 of coverage to be a remote notary, just because your liability increases. So there's two options for that. You can obtain a rider or an adjustment for your current notarial bond, which will increase the amount to $10,000, and you can just submit that rider to us. Or you can take out a separate $5,000 bond, but that will only cover, you won't have $10,000 of coverage total. You'll only have $5,000 of coverage on remote notarizations and $5,000 of coverage on traditional notarizations. So it doesn't increase your liability on one or the other. It kind of makes them separate. And if you do take out a separate $5,000 remote notary bond, that expires when your commission expires. So once you get the bond, your vendor will hopefully have provided you with an electronic signature and seal. One thing that's different about remote notarization is you do have to have an electronic signature and seal, which means basically a replication of your notarial seal, but in an electronic form. All our vendors have really great replications. They'll produce one for you when you apply. You have to submit this to our office because we have to have just like a comparison, just like with your signature on your handwritten wet signatures. We need to have a digital signature and seal to match, just in case anything is ever called into question. Every electronic seal will be slightly different, but it does have to have some sort of timestamp or way to digitally track when it was signed. You'll then submit the additional bonding coverage, application, and electronic seal to us via email, just notary@utah.gov. That is the email that any questions can go to. And we'll touch on the background check a bit later, but if you do need a background check, if you became a notary prior to November 1st, 2019 and did not submit a background check, you will have to submit a background check to become a remote notary. So if we receive your application and we need a background check, we will send you that link. It takes about 3 to 5 business days. It's not that bad, and there's no additional charge. Once your background check is submitted and we have all the proper paperwork, there's a $50 fee, and you can just call us and pay us over the phone. We don't have an online portal to pay that yet. Once that's all complete, we will mark you as approved in the system, and you will be a remote notary. All right, so some FAQs about remote notarization that we get a lot. One, does the person need to be in Utah for a document to be remotely notarized? Per traditional notary, you both have to be within the state boundaries of Utah. It's a Utah notary. They're only commissioned to notarize while in Utah. And so obviously that means that the person would physically have to be in Utah as well. With remote notarization, the notary still has to be physically in Utah because that's where their commission is active. But the person you can notarize a document for, it does not have to be in Utah. So if you get contacted by someone who needs a Utah notary to notarize, let's say closing documents or some sort of legal document to be recorded, and you're a remote notary in Utah, you can notarize it for them. Another one we get is cost per year. The only cost that we have is the $50 application fee, and that's every 4 years. Or if you get commissioned halfway through, it'd be $50 now, and then you'd have to pay it when your commission expires. The cost per remote notarization platform are very different. I just put a couple on here, the most popular ones that we've had. DocVerify is $40 per month. A lot of these platforms do group discounts. So if you had 10 notaries in your office that you signed with DocVerify, that price would go down. Notarize is $90 per month, and SignX is $120 per year. DocVerify and SignX are two of the most versatile remote notary platforms that I think we've approved. They allow notaries to kind of do as they please instead of being contracted with the platform. You're kind of just a private contractor, so you are using theirs. They're not contacting you to perform any notarizations. And then we did have some fee changes for notarizations as of November 1st. Oh, that's supposed to say 2019. Sorry about that. As of November 1st, 2019, the cost of a notarization increased. So notaries can charge up to $10 maximum per traditional notarization, and a notary can charge a maximum of $25 per remote notarization. The difference in those is simply because a notary has to pay those higher fees to use the vendor platform, and therefore they need to charge more for the notarization. It also is just slightly more difficult because it's not like you're sitting at your desk at work and someone comes in to get a notarization. You're getting online, paying for that platform to be a remote notary. And the thing I forgot to include on this slide is that the user, the person that you're notarizing the document for, can also have different fees that they have to pay to DocVerify or SignX. We're going to talk about it on the next slide, I think, but there is identity verification, which does cost money. And if an individual were to fail it, they'd still have to pay $10 to $15 for your time, but the notary can't take any of that maximum. They can only take maximum of $25 if the notarization is completed. All right, the background check requirement. The legislature found it necessary to implement a background check requirement when approving remote notaries because, as I said earlier, the liability increased. That's supposed to say 2019 again. My brain's just consumed by 2020. So the background check is mandatory for all notaries. If a notary is commissioned before November 1st and you want to become a remote notary, you will have to submit a background check. All notaries applying for the first time or renewing their commission will also have to submit a background check as of past November 1st. So if you took the test before November 1st and you've put it off, you can still get it without taking a background check. But once you take the test right now, if you're renewing or applying for the first time, you'll automatically be sent to the background check page and you'll just submit it and it won't say that it was submitted. It has to be separate because in our office, we can't deal with social security numbers. But once you submit it, we'll get it and you won't hear anything back about whether you passed it or not. But there's no additional cost. So it remains $95 for the test application and background check. Something that I didn't put on here, but I'll briefly touch on is what the background check is looking for. State code says crimes that violate moral turpitude. I personally would love some clarification on that because moral turpitude, the definition is along the lines of something that violates the community's morals, and communities have different morals. So we mainly just look for charges that would obstruct someone's ability to properly perform the functions that are asked of a notary. So fraudulent charges like forgery, any sort of money laundering or fraud things along those lines. And then obviously there's certain felonies that would be rejected, but most people who have committed felonies that would cause them to be rejected are not applying to be notaries. But we do view it on a case-by-case basis, and anyone can appeal if their background check leads to them being rejected. We do have an appeal process. So if there is an explanation or something, we are very understanding and do look at it case by case. All right, so a lot of questions we've gotten about remote notarization are the difference between remote and electronic notarization. So traditional notarization is when you're in the physical presence of an individual. They sign a wet signature on a piece of paper. The notary signs a wet signature, fills out the notarial language on a piece of paper, and puts a wet seal on it. An electronic notarization is basically the same as a traditional notarization, but it's completely electronic. So it remains in person. You must be in the physical presence to complete an electronic notarization, but you don't have to have any separate certification or be signed with a vendor. So one company that I think is really popular for electronic notarizations is DocuSign. You still have to verify with a photo ID in your physical, so they'd show you a physical ID, or if the person's personally known to you, then they still have to be in your physical presence. For an electronic notarization, a lot of questions we get is, well, if they're signing electronically and I'm signing electronically, how do I know that how do I put my stamp on it? So the code actually says that a notarial certificate on an electronic message or document is considered complete without the notary's official seal if the following information appears electronically within the message or document. So what this is saying is, as long as you put all the information that is on your stamp on the document, so your name, your commission number, and then Notary Public, State of Utah, and my commission expires on, that counts as a complete notarization. And obviously you have to have the state that it's taking place in, the county, and that notarial language in your signature, but you don't need to replicate your seal on an electronic notarization. A remote notarization they're not done in the physical presence of the individual. They use those approved remote notary vendors, the technological systems, to complete the notarization. Obviously, there's a little bit more wiggle room for identification when you're just looking at it through a screen. So most of these systems have security measures before you even get on the video conference with the individual to verify their identity. It's the knowledge-based authentication that it asks you things like, what color car did you buy? It's just public record questions that verify your identity. If the individual cannot pass the KBA, the notarization cannot be completed because the system won't trust who that individual is. Throughout the process, and you can see in that Doc Verify video earlier, you still have to verify the individual's identification, but it's obviously just an added security measure. You do have options on a lot of these technological platforms to complete notarizations for individuals that are personally known to you. It's just a different process, and it's a little different for all of them. And then the major difference between an electronic, besides not being in the physical presence, is that you do have to replicate your seal for a remote notarization. So you have to have all that information, but it will look like an electronic stamp, just like your notary stamp in most cases, but it will also be accompanied by a statement saying that it was electronically signed, which on an electronic notarization that usually happens as well, but it will also say that it's remotely signed, and it will have like a trackable path to that's tamper evident. And then at the bottom, here's just a video explaining the difference by Doc Verify, one of our vendors. Okay, and then the number one question we've gotten this year is printing and recording electronic documents. Unfortunately, I don't have a very simple answer for this. There's not a lot of clarification in Utah code. If a document is remotely or electronically notarized, its original form is an electronic document with a trackable and secure digital signature path. All of our remote notary vendors have tamper evident technology that allows the path of the document to be tracked to prevent any fraud. So nothing can be changed in the document after it's notarized, no names, nothing. And that signature path will allow you to see that. If there's no signature path on an electronically notarized document, it's definitely concerning. Some states, like Florida, allow for papering out, which is when a hard copy of the electronically signed document is printed out. So it's printed out, and individuals will add a cover page, almost like a copy certification, that it's a true copy of the document. There's no statute in Utah code as of now that explicitly allows for this to take place. Other states prohibit acts like papering out. I know in Arizona, the only way to keep an electronic document legal and certified is to keep it electronic. They do not allow papering out, AKA printing it out and then doing a copy certification on it, saying it's a true and correct copy. Hopefully in the 2021 session, we have asked for clarification on this regarding standards and laws for printing out electronic documents, especially because I know there are some statute requirements for the ability to electronically record documents. So we are hoping to get some clarification on that. And if you have any questions regarding that, we can take that and pass it along to the legislature, because I know it's a little complicated. As for now, we've spoken to some of our attorneys, and we think that our recommendation is to keep the document in its original form, aka electronic, specifically, not vice versa. For I know that there's ways to scan in physical copies and record those electronically, but it's a bit more complicated switching with the notarization from electronic to physical. So our recommendation is to keep it in its original form, which is electronic. And then I just wanted to briefly touch on entity registration. We have had some of the recorders be responsible. As of 2019, we have a requirement to have all limited purpose entities, in this case municipalities, register with our office. I think we have about 222 out of 246 registered with our office. But if you have any questions, if this doesn't sound familiar, please reach out to us. We're trying to make sure that the auditor's office doesn't go after anyone and that we get all of them registered. Here's some instructions, and once again, we'll send this out. But most importantly, it's just to visit entityregistry.utah.gov, and we will give you access and get you logged in. I know for some cities, it's been the clerks that have been handling it, but some of them, it has been the recorders. So we just wanted to mention this. And if you have any questions regarding the documents, if you were the one that submitted it last year, we do have all the creation documents that were submitted last year. We just created a new system, so we couldn't transfer them over. So we will be prepared to do that, and we can send them out to you if you don't want to go back into the archives and get them. Okay, so I didn't touch on specifics about notarizations because I figured it might be easier just to have people ask questions if they did have questions about how to perform a notarization, or specifically about electronic documents or anything really. So I kind of wanted to keep it short and sweet and then open it up to any questions if anyone had any specific questions on notarizations, because I know sometimes it's not really about just the generic process, it's about specific circumstances that have popped up. I don't know how we've been doing
Addie,
questions. Yeah.
they're going to type them in the chat box if
Okay.
anyone has questions. But I do have a comment. It was said that she cannot log into her account, and every time she tries to get set up again, it does not work for her.
Okay.
Do you have any suggestions for her?
Yeah, so you can always reach out to, is that for notary or entity registration?
I think it's probably for entity registration.
Okay, yes. So for entity reg, we have been having a problem. If you do request access and we send the email, yes, people are being sent in circles. The links we send out to set up a password only last for 24 hours because they have a Salesforce as a security measure that's implemented. So you can't get into that email and change the password past 24 hours. My recommendation would be to send an email to entities at utah.gov. If you have already sent one, we probably just reset it. But once again, if you didn't get into that, but if you want to send me an email, it's just, I'll put the email in the chat. We can work on getting you in and getting logged in. But I do apologize. We have been trying to work with Salesforce on how to fix people getting into the new system.
Okay, we have another comment. I affix a label with the notary clause on docs that don't have one. Is this still okay?
Yes. So if there's no room on a document to put the notarial language, you can always just like staple a paper to it, or some people by label, I think you just mean like a small little area, or some people have stamps. It's completely fine if you actually legally have to add the notarial language. So yes, of course, if it doesn't have one, you can put a label, a stamp, you can attach a separate page. Just make sure that if you do attach a separate page, that it's actually attached so someone can't take your notarization and affix it to something else. So we recommend stapling it and making sure that it's combined properly. Along with that, I guess I'll touch on this. We see a lot of errors in our office regarding notarizations that don't have any notarial language. That's probably the most common mistake we see. By notarial language, I just mean even it literally can just be subscribed and sworn to me if you're performing a jurat, or I guess an acknowledgement language is a bit more complicated, but we have examples of those on our website if you want to just print them off and have a bunch of them printed off so you can either write it or attach it. But a notarization is not complete unless it has that language, and we are going to start issuing notarial warnings for people that don't do that, because it completely invalidates the notarization. And in our office, we do apostilles and authentications, and if we don't have the language on them, those individuals can't take it to their country. So we just want to stress making sure you add the notarial language and that it's approved by Utah code. Yes, I can send my slides to, I've already sent my slides to Denise, but I'm not sure about posting it on the website, but I'm completely fine with that.
Okay, I have a question on, you know how you have that samples of notary language. Didn't it recently change where you can't use he and she, you have to use they and them or whatever? Is that true?
I am not sure on that one. So these are our copies. We still have he, she, they on there. So this is the sample of the acknowledgement. This is completely up to Utah code. So
Okay.
you can use he, she. They might have just added they. I'm not sure. I actually haven't been presented with that, but I can find an answer. But if you use this, it won't be rejected at all.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, the question is, to perform an electronic notarization, do you need to use a vendor platform? So yes, that is probably the number one rule with Utah's remote notary laws. Throughout the pandemic, a lot of other states have allowed notaries to use Skype and Zoom to check verification and have the individual sign, and then they'll send the document. However, Utah, because we implemented in November the remote notary law, the governor's office didn't deem it necessary, because we did have that mechanism for documents to be signed not in the presence of the other individual. But the kind of one hang up with Utah's law is that you do have to use the vendor platform. And I do recognize that they're expensive, and we have been reaching out to some less expensive vendors to try and hopefully get them approved, but you do have to use the vendor. So things like Zoom, Skype, FaceTime, those are not acceptable video conferencing calls to use, because they don't have the security implemented that our vendors do, like the CBA technology and the CBA technology. They don't have the video recording, because another thing that I forgot to mention about our vendor platforms is that within the vendor platforms, as a remote notary, you're required to have an electronic Notary journal, and those journals are built into the system. So it will automatically record all the information. It will record a video. It will record what type of ID you verified into their system. So that's why we required a vendor, because the security measures are just so much stronger.
Okay, I have another question.
Mhm.
Okay, sometimes they'll come in and they already have the notary language on there, and where it says, okay, say for instance, I'm in Utah County, but it says Salt Lake County.
Mhm.
Is it okay for me to cross off Salt Lake County and just write the word Utah because that's where
Yeah,
I'm at?
so you can cross off really anything in notarial language, and as long as you're not changing anything radically, I would say that that's fine, and just do a little initial next to it. But yeah, you can cross off the county. Sometimes we even get documents, we see documents that are for a different state. So let's say you get a document that's supposed to be, it says state of Arizona, you can cross off the state and the county. I would just recommend to check the notarial language on those to make sure that it satisfies Utah code as well as I guess Arizona code. But yeah, you can cross off anything as long as you do a little initial next to it and just replace it with what was correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Along with those lines, you can also just print off and either tape over or attach something else if you're not comfortable with making marks on the notarial language.
Okay, we don't have any other questions up here, so we do have your presentation and we know how to get a hold of you now. We appreciate your time.
Perfect.
And your presentation was very helpful. Thank you so much.
No problem. Have a nice day, everyone. And if you ever have any questions, you can just send them to notary@utah.gov. Myself and basically everyone else in our office watches that email, so
okay,
we can get back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Addie.
No problem. Have a nice night, everyone.